The United States has no shortage of innovation. We have incredible engineers. We have really innovative defense companies. I think the real challenge that a lot of companies fail to think about is how to transition a promising prototype to a scalable operational capability. You can have the best technology, but if you can't reliably sustain it and scale it, it never actually gets into the hands of the users. Equally important is investing in the demand, the manufacturing infrastructure, workforce development, supplier readiness, testing capability, quality systems. So you can have the best technology in the world, but if you can't deliver it to a customer, your prototype will sit on a shelf.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm talking with Antoinett Dufort, Vice President of Operations at Hidden Level, a Syracuse-based defense tech company building passive radar and RF sensing systems to detect and track drone threats without emitting a single signal. You guys just raised $100 million in the past year, launched a next-gen capability called Power in the Sky in March. And Antoinett joined the company in 2021 as employee number 20 and has been at the center of scaling it ever since. She was also just named the MACNY's 2026 Innovator of the Year. So, Antoinett, super excited. Welcome to the show, and let's do it.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So, employee number 20, company's first female team member. You had a career in healthcare and other things before in operations. What made you take this bet, on this small team of engineers with some drone detection idea?
Yeah. So prior to working in med device, I did work in the defense industry for another Syracuse company. So I had some experience in this space. And while I was at that company, I worked with a number of the team members who are here today. It is a special team, a team I would follow anywhere, just the exceptional engineering talent and the technology that they've developed in the past at Hidden Level. It was a sure bet from my perspective. Great group of people to work with, but just, the talent to be able to really do it. A lot of my focus really is around scaling their technology. And it's really been just probably the biggest, privilege and honor of my career to be able to take their technology and be able to scale that into a repeatable production process. So, yeah, they're just super dream team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as you've gone through these different, companies, some different sectors, what's the kind of common thread through these in building the operation function where one didn't really exist or just immature still, young?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, what's common really is about building that repeatability. And it doesn't matter what area of operations that you're working in, it's driving to standard work, driving to good quality and repeatability. That, whether you're working in defense manufacturing, you're working in commercial manufacturing, you're working in med device, those core concepts really apply across the board. I think the other kind of commonality is both med device and manufacturing are very centered around the user. Everything you learn in healthcare is around patient outcomes and patient experience. And I think when you do defense manufacturing really, really well, you start to think of it in a very similar way. It's about the warfighter's experience. It's about, the public safety, the lives that you're going to save, and the criticality of the technology and being able to do that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, tied with that, you've said before, the defense industrial base doesn't have an innovation problem. It has a scaling problem. It sounds like that ties to it. What do you mean? And then how do you break that down? It's easy to say, here's our widget, here's our prototype. You got to do that to get it out the door, but then it's a lot harder to scale. So I'd love to hear kind of your take on that and experiences you've seen on both sides of winning that and losing that.
Yeah, I think, the United States has no shortage of innovation today. I really don't believe it does. We have incredible engineers. We had really innovative defense companies in the United States. there's advanced technologies being developed across the ecosystem kind of every day. I think the real challenge that a lot of companies fail to think about is how to transition a promising prototype to a scalable operational capability. I think you may have heard people talk about the valley of death, and that's exactly that space. It's when you have really incredible technologists and engineers who develop great technology, but nobody is thinking about how do you scale that technology and how do you actually bring that through production in a repeatable way and deploy that at scale. And that's an entirely different skill space. So you can have the best technology in the world. I don't want to underestimate. We have amazing technology, and that is super important. But equally important is investing in the demand, being able to support the demand and the manufacturing infrastructure, workforce development, supplier readiness, testing capability, quality systems, all of the things that are happening behind the scenes that we're not necessarily thinking about when we're talking about how cool the tech is. The tech is important. I don't want to, I want to be really clear. The tech has to work, but you can have the best technology, but if you can't reliably sustain it and scale it, it never actually gets into the hands of the users. So focusing on that operational readiness is so important. I'm super proud of the hidden level team because they brought me on relatively early, like before we were really starting to look at scale. And that has allowed us and enabled us to build our manufacturing processes, our supply chain processes, our quality processes with that future scale in mind so that we're not having to go react to it now that it's really becoming a reality to scale production to meet the demand that the market is starting to introduce.
In that, right, which is amazing that they did that. In that role, what would you say is like the top one or two things where you were able to get involved and drive the design of the prototype or really influence it, whether it's supply chain for a certain material or whatever, so that you had the capability to scale it? Were there a couple examples like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we've been so much involved in the design, but we certainly have provided feedback into our supply chain processes. So I think the biggest impact that we had was working really closely with our supply chain partners. So when I think about our printed circuit board assembly, we have custom printed circuit boards that are within our technology. And when I think about those very early discussions and building those relationships within the supply chain, that early work that we did has enabled us to have conversations today around, hey, can you help support us in holding some inventory? We're seeing lead times at this component level of the board getting quite long and working through those things because we're not reacting now to increased demand. We're talking about future scale, and we've been doing all of our modeling around volumes hand in hand within our supply chain so that we can react to that well. We've really been focused, me and my team really focus on making sure that we are providing feedback into kind of some of the cabling and different things that go on. But, the design really, we let the experts do that. They have designed for manufacturability before, but in many ways, it's just really enablement of all of the pieces that need to fall into place. I think the other area that comes to mind really is building a quality management system. If you've worked in the defense industry at all, you know that it's highly regulated. There are compliance factors. There are things like, ensuring we're using a US-based supply chain. All of those different factors are things that we focused on very early so that we could be sure that we didn't have to go back and rework those things later. And we worked hand in hand with our engineers through the design process on some of those things and around supplier selection and compliance requirements and where we wanted to flow down certain quality requirements to our suppliers early as they were working the prototype process as well.
And you're starting to scale. You've got like 4 manufacturings. Like how much you're planning for and what are you actually delivering? Just to give us some context around.
So we're really looking at exponentially scaling, and as we look at those things, everything becomes exponentially more complex. We have more employees today than we had in the past. We have more suppliers than we had in the past. So the work that we do and that we continue to revisit around good process and workflow development and standard work, we ensure that we're kind of building into that things that we can improve or drive. One of my favorite questions that we ask in our staff meetings all the time is, what would have to be true for this to be feasible, right? So even though it doesn't have to be true today, we already know what are the levers that we have to pull and what are the changes that we need to make when we say green light go. And that level of preparedness and thinking, we've embedded that into the culture and into the workforce. So even a person on a technician on the production line is thinking about in their day-to-day work, if I had to do this exponentially at a larger volume, what would have to be true? What would have to be different about how I work? And we talk about that all the time. So a lot of it has been culture and how we built the team and how we've started to think about kind of the challenges that we have today or the challenges that we might be facing as scaling problems.
That's so important. As you've done this, what's been the hardest piece of this, scaling in your journey so far? You're keeping a good eye on it, but there's probably like one choke point or one area that just,
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges, and this is probably a little bit unique to defense that I haven't seen in other industries I've worked in, is, understanding the demand. So at hidden level within the defense industry, we have to model based on, we get great insights from our BD team. They're talking to the customer all the time. But we also are looking at more modeling versus in a commercial environment. In med device, for example, we were fed from our customers really clear forecast information, right? So we're using, instead of clear forecast, we're using insights to define those models. But because of the lead times in the semiconductor lead times and the lead time of some of the materials, our lead times are quite a bit longer than maybe where the forecasts or insights lay out. So I think for companies like Hidden Level, it's really important that we understand what those risks are. And one of the things that we've done very proactively is, as we're building these models, we really do look at where the risks lie and have made decisions and worked with suppliers to help make these decisions around bringing material in early. So we have suppliers that will hold material for us. We have gone out kind of at risk based on the insights that we have and have, invested in material or infrastructure for scale. And we're not necessarily in a position to have complete certainty around that space. But that actually has put us in a very great position for kind of this moment that we are in right now, because we're not having to catch up. So we have customers now who are communicating a lot of, demand and asking us about the availability of our sensors and our technology, and we're well positioned to be able to respond to those questions and those asks and those proposals because we have kind of warmed up our supply chain and because we've invested in RF testing technology that supports future scale. So it's so much about not being reactive, and really saying, hey, where do we want to kind of stick our neck out maybe just a little bit and proactively plan? And that really comes down to that, what would have to be true to successfully execute. And sometimes that's investment. So I think, it would be a beautiful world if, we could get perfect information or a more, accurate flow. No, I always look at this from a supply chain perspective and a production planning perspective. I'm sure my BD team would love that too. But it's, better information. And I think as a, emerging technology, that will improve with time is my hope.
yeah, and you brought up a great point. You were able to make the investments in the supply chain so you could respond quickly because when the contracts turn on, you're like, oh, well, I saw 2 years, to be able to buy that backlog of material.
We don't want to provide an 52-week lead time to our customer. We want to be able to be responsive. So I think that's one of the unique things about Hidden Level compared to maybe other more traditional defense contractors and having worked for one, they're responding directly to the demand, right? When you receive the order, the lead time starts. We are trying to maintain inventory on our shelf so we can be more reactive. And we build to a forecast, which is unique, but also requires a different risk tolerance, I think, within the business.
But that doesn't just happen for companies that are starting up as you were employee 20. What was the big breakthrough in level that allowed you to begin that journey to have the freedom to invest? You've raised some great capital, but there had to be what was the big milestone if you had to put one stake in the ground?
I think, we were awarded the Focus contract, and that certainly was a big one, but we have always prepared to scale. When very early on, one of the first things we did is we deployed in a major urban area on our own investment, deployed infrastructure to enable our airspace monitoring service. And I think it's been a part of our culture to lean forward into that space. And a lot of that has been keeping the needs of our future customers in mind. What are they going to require, and are we preparing for that? So, when we've talked to potential investors, we're a privately held company, but as we've looked at all of that, that's always been kind of the something that we're talking about is, we're going to invest some of this money in scaling. Some of this money will be invested into our technology because that's really important, but equally important to the technology is also the ability to be able to deliver it. And you can't have one without the other. You can't have the best technology in the world if you can't deliver it to a customer. It's going to sit on your prototype will sit on a shelf. If you invest fully in all of your operational capability, that's great. If you don't have really great tech in order to build, you're going to have, people standing around waiting to build something. So understanding that the business has to be holistic, and you can be you can be a research and development, you can be a development company and develop great tech, and you can be an operational focused company is important. And I think that a lot of companies might miss that.
Yeah, very interesting perspective the way you guys done it. It makes sense. It's hard to execute what you're talking about, though. I think for startups, you've got your tech, and the think like that is, very challenging.
Yeah, it definitely needs an advocate, and I think that was a little bit of, our founder's genius in that he understood that piece of it, and bringing somebody in who had scaled programs before and had worked in this space before, I think you know, it was a very smart decision because it brought that. I've always had an equal voice at the table with the technology.
That's awesome. Well, let's back out a little bit because I may have got a little deep before. I shared high level kind of drone detection, or threat. Talk to us about hidden level. What do you guys do? What is your kind of mission statement? And what are your big thrusts of going into the market?
Yeah. We help our customers see the unseen things, right? So we use advanced passive RF sensing and airspace awareness technologies. The airspace is becoming increasingly complex. It's more congested than it ever has been. There's drones, there's low altitude aircraft. There's lots of things that are happening both commercially and in the defense environment, right? So our technology has applications both commercially and across the defense environment as well, right? So anything from public safety, stadium security to, kind of what we're seeing in Ukraine and some of these conflicts. I think many traditional systems that are used for airspace awareness were not designed for low altitude. It's an operating environment that's very difficult to detect in. The same technology that can detect a plane cannot always as easily detect a drone or something smaller in the airspace. So our tech is designed to provide persistent awareness of the airspace. We do have a software as a service product, which is an airspace monitoring service that people can subscribe to. One of the cool things about it is it allows a lot of coordination across different resources. So local PD could be using it at the same time as, the Army or Navy or someone who would be potentially using it for a threat, and it would allow them to coordinate on what that threat is. It can also help determine, is that really a threat? It can enable enable the skies. Today, we support operations in some of the nation's most demanding airspace environments. We have, including site of some critical national security sites. Our focus is delivering scalable, operationally deployed sensing capabilities.
And did you see the demand signal for your capability increase more with Ukraine or Israel or this last Iranian beginning of that where we saw what drones can do?
Yeah, that's a difficult question for me to answer, but I think we definitely started, with Ukraine. I remember waking up that morning and seeing that on the news. And when we came in on Monday, certainly the conversations we were having were far different. So I think it absolutely began with that. And I think that that was a pivotal moment for Americans to see, really acknowledge that this could be a threat, that maybe there was something that more there than, nuisance drones in that sense, and drones can be used for a lot of great things, right? I laugh. We talked about med device that's, the hospital system that I had worked for where I implemented ISO 9001, they actually use them for medical delivery across their different campuses for medicine. So not every drone is a threat. I always like to say that. And our technology can be used to enable that type of use as well, so it's identification of where is something not good and where is there an opportunity to enable something that can be helpful and supportive for a country. So it's, that I think that is one of the cool things about what Hidden Level does. It's agnostic to whether or not it's dangerous or not.
Yeah. Customer primarily, federal government, local governments in the US.
Yep. So our largest customer is absolutely the U.S. government. We do also have customers who are local PD. I think one I can speak to. There's certainly some of our customers I can't talk about, but the Arlington PD in Arlington, Texas, uses us around Dallas Cowboy Stadium, for example. But our largest customer is the U.S. government. And we have deployments that support their operations.
Does your so you're identifying and, tracking small, low altitude type drones from like a integration with an actual then kinetic or capability to drop it. Do you guys do any of that, or is that just an integration with another, group?
Yeah, so we don't do that type of technology ourselves, but our technology can be integrated.
That makes sense. Because yeah, it is hard to see some of these drones are like little birds.
Yes.
How do you then, so when you're building, we'll go back a little more to just like building, maybe some workforce questions. When you bring something, how do you decide on what to bring something in-house versus source it externally? What is there a framework you use, or how do you think through that?
Yeah, I mean, if we call it kind of a make versus buy decision, right? As we're looking at that, and a lot of it is around capability. Right. There's certain capabilities that we retain very closely. So we do all of our own assembly. We do all of our own calibration of our sensors. We do all of the tests, the final test of our sensors in house. Right. And that really is our production process. Things like printed circuit board assembly, we look for really strong supply chain partners to perform that type of work because it is a capability that they've developed and honed for years and years and years. So I'm a big proponent of, to become vertically integrated just for the sake of being vertically integrated doesn't always make sense. If you can find the right US based supply chain partners to be able to support you in the way and work alongside with you. So there's a lot of communication that goes into that work. But it's critical to us to maintain the quality of the sensor, the final test of the sensor, the conformance of our product from a quality perspective internally.
Is it hard to find supply partners in some of these critical, circuit boards that can meet your scaling demands?
We've been very, very fortunate in that regard, in that we have a number of supply chain partners that have worked with us through the prototyping process through scale. I think because we were very early on thinking about scale, the partners that we've selected have the capability and the capacity to meet our requirements, and we work hand in hand with them as we model larger quantities. So I don't want to say that it's easy, but I think that because we approached it with a lot of intention right at the very beginning, we've put ourselves in a very good position where that is regarded.
And then other potential scarcity, workforce developments, as you guys are scaling, are you finding, I think you guys are involved in New York State doing that, but where are you finding the biggest skills gap are right now?
I think we are fortunate in the sense that we are here in central New York to some degree, in the sense that there is a highly capable workforce here in our space, due to the number of contractors that are in this region. I do think that nationally, one of the biggest challenges that we're having, though, is that we are starting to see shortages of skilled technical talent. Within Central New York, we've been working very, very closely both with Syracuse University. We have a good relationship with them that becomes a great feeder for engineering talent. They have a long history of supporting the defense industrial base through their programs and then we also have a great relationship with a local community college here that has actually established a really great electromechanical technician program. They offer a certification as well as a associate's degree in that space. You mentioned in the beginning when you were doing my intro, MACNY, MACNY. That's the Manufacturing Association of Central New York. They're an industry group that's local here and advocates for manufacturing. They have just established a manufacturing institute, like a training institute here that we are getting very involved in. So I think we are in this little kind of space where I see great engagement from at both the state level, the local level, and the industry level, where those three areas of those three legs are kind of coming together to really focus on making a strong environment for industry within central New York. And I think that that's kind of where the magic has to happen in this space. It does need to be, the universities and the education system, industry needs to be engaged and they need to be engaging with those universities and colleges, as well as having great industry partners that are all supported by the state. So right now, it's certainly an area I watch very, very closely. I'm excited about MACNY's Talent Institute because what they're building. But we're very fortunate that the education system surrounding us is supporting the manufacturing industry within central New York.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. If you look across let's take a bigger picture across the country, do you feel like the lack of that kind of structure and domestic manufacturing capability, you know, is it an issue from where you're seated, and where does that show itself most obviously?
I do think it's an issue. I think that it is a recognized issue that is beginning to be addressed. So it's improving. I think the biggest concern I have and the biggest issue I think we had is really it's a question of resilience, for the defense industrial base. For many, many years, there has not been this type of investment into it. I think there's maybe a risk or the reality that this isn't something you can just turn on. It's going to take a little bit of work and it's going to take persistence, and from that perspective, I think the resilience of the industrial base isn't where it needs to be. I think you think about supply chain and so much has been offshored for so many years. You can't build a fab and turn it on tomorrow, right? It requires a lot of coordination across industry and local and state government to be able to onshore so much of what we depend on today. So I think we're starting to see the investment. I think there's great bipartisan support in these spaces. All the right things are happening. I think the risk really becomes just the timelines, and I think industry has to lean in and participate to help support the workforce development that's going to be required because you can build it, but we still need people to work within those spaces.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But I think this AI, the AI, big push will also be interesting as it's pushing, say, a lot of, white collar jobs, kind of entry level white collar jobs are going to be eliminated. So where do they go? That's I mean, part of that is kind of encouraging. It's also terrifying. Where do you tell your kid to go or your grandkid, depending on how old they're like, what should they do if they're, 8 and they're starting to get ready for school? Like, what's it going to look like?
It is. It's very, it's a huge, I think, experiment to some degree. We're gonna learn a lot over the next few years, and I encourage everybody, my own children. I encourage them. You have to lean in and pay attention to what is happening in the world, and making sure that you're incorporating that into your decision space on your own future or how you're driving decisions within your business. AI is an amazing tool. It's going to enable a lot of efficiencies within manufacturing. I couldn't be more excited about it. But at the same time, right, there's still going to need to be people to build the technology and the things that we have, and making sure that they have the right technical expertise to be able to do that. Will be certainly, manufacturing, we've been building things with machines for a long time. The machines are just changing to some degree.
Yep. Do you, how do you harness AI within, your organization?
I think of it very much as a tool. It is a tool. It should be able to help, if you can get something to a place where it is repeatable and able to be done again, done reliably. If you can get to that point faster because you're able to access information that informs decision making more quickly, I think that that is a great way to be able to use that tool today. And, we are certainly exploring what AI tools we can implement within our process flows that will be able to help us. But it's certainly not something that you just want to, kind of throw paint at the wall and see which color you like. We really have to understand how you're implementing it and work through that. So we are embracing it, but we're also really careful and precise about where we're applying it and making sure we understand the output of it as well. It's we approach our manufacturing process through, I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of a theory of constraints where we're always looking for at any operational step throughout the process, right, can be measured, and to understand where the true bottlenecks are, you can only build systems as fast as your longest process step. So your longest process step is your key bottleneck. You should be targeting that at any point. So anytime we're looking for automation or we're looking for improvement opportunities, and automation isn't always AI. It's an automated test process. It could be software driven in many different ways. We're trying to target what is the constrained step first, right? And when we solve that problem, we can go to the next constraint. And that's how we are approaching kind of any sort of scaling modeling that we look at.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, definitely effective, and you're not just applying AI and having everyone forget how to do everything because they just rely on AI and don't put any critical thought to it.
Yeah. And you have to know that it's right also.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have to start wrapping up. Kind of a lightning round. I'm gonna give you just a couple questions. Fire away.
Okay.
Biggest myth about selling to the DoD or DOW.
I think that that's probably that the technology is the only thing, right? You have to be able to deliver it reliably and scalably. And if you are approaching, again, we talked about this, you have the best tech in the world, but you can't deliver it. Delivering it on time, on schedule is critical. It is critical.
All right. Hardest lesson you have learned about, being part of the defense company startup.
You're not going to get clarity in your demand in every case. So you have to be able to model and do the work to be able to really start to create plans and take risks in the right places. You have to be intentional about those risks that you're going to take. But you will operate in a world of uncertainty to some degree. You have to be comfortable with that.
One operational practice that you've pulled from healthcare that defense manufacturing should adopt.
Oh, wholeheartedly, it is, within healthcare, it's be patient centered. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that if you can create a culture where you understand the importance of the user, you understand that you're supporting public safety, you understand that the tech needs to work correctly and be good quality, great quality for the warfighter, and you center kind of yourself from a mission perspective around that, that why is very meaningful for people. So I think very much thinking about not just, hey, I've got cool tech or, hey, I've got, a repeatable process. It's the why. And to focus on that, I think can be very meaningful.
All right, I am going to break my own rule, but do you think defense manufacturers lose that? I mean, to me, that is like 101 of know where your customers are. But do you see that differently in healthcare versus defense? Like there is a difference?
I did see that different. See, I think that, it always in every company I've worked for that has been mission driven, and I think people understand that. But I do think the deep understanding on the factory floor, I think it comes down to not necessarily does our BD team who goes out and talks to the customer every day understand that? I don't know if it's always brought all the way through to the people who are influencing at a microscopic level the quality of the product. Are they always being given that connection? And I think it's the responsibility of leadership to be talking about that and making sure that their teams understand that and that resonates with them.
So infusing that mindset all the way through your company, not just in okay, I'm missing probably, well, incorrectly. Again, you were talking about the product side, but I'm like, who doesn't do that?
Yeah, no, it's very much about, and from my perspective, it's about the people. It's the people who, the product, the tech, the product, absolutely. That is like lowest common denominator. Of course, we're thinking about that in getting that voice of customer there. But it's just as important for the guy who ships it off our loading dock to understand that getting that into the hands of the warfighter on schedule, on time, that it's packaged correctly, all of that can influence something, and that's important as well.
Yeah, that's great. Can you name a sacred cow in defense tech that will be proven false?
Oh, can I name a sacred cow? I think the assumption around the kind of the critical level component, thinking about semiconductors, that can be onshored overnight. We read about it a lot in the news, and there is investment and there's amazing progress that's being made across industry and investment going into domestic manufacturing capacity, particularly with semiconductor infrastructure. But that supply chain resiliency, I think, is going to take time. We talked a lot about hidden level investing early in materials and taking kind of some of those risks. We're going to have to do that until the US based fabs are built and operating and producing. So I think it's been really important to me and to Hidden Level to support strengthening US based manufacturing and supply chain. Any opportunity that we have, even if it's at the component level, to onshore the assembly of that or any element of that, we work closely with suppliers to do that because I think it's really important. Industrial capacity, is going to be built over years, not quarters or, to be able to really have the resilience of a supply chain that I believe the US needs.
5 years, what does hidden level look like?
Oh gosh, I think it could go in a lot of directions. I think we're continuing to grow, we're continuing to scale. I certainly, it is my hope that it is the capstone of my career and the story that I can tell my grandchildren about someday is how we built this amazing company that is really enabling airspace awareness across our country or the world. I think we will continue to develop amazing technology and continue to enhance the technology that we've already developed. I believe it'll be the system of choice for low altitude airspace awareness.
Well, that's fantastic. And I hope to see you there. I agree. A lot of potential. Love what you guys are doing. So, Antoinette, really sharp conversation. Super exciting to listen to what you're doing. And again, for me, it's just, I've heard it. I have a podcast with other companies, just reiterating technology is hard, but the real hard part is building the machine that can scale that technology. Like that's where the rubber meets the road. So, if people want to follow what you're doing or connect with you, where should they go?
Yeah, we love to connect with people who are interested in this space. You can follow us on hiddenlevel.com, or you can find me or Hidden Level on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, thanks, Antoinette. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate your time today.